Welcome in everyone to the Hawks Eye podcast. And today I've got a real special guest for this live show. We have guest Garret Greenlee of Football Analysis on YouTube. Garrett's been nice enough to do a live show. Usually we pre-record these, but Garrett's come on here. We're prepared to answer some of your guys' questions. We're going to go through a variety of different topics. But first off, Garret, how are you doing, man? How are your holidays and everything?
I'm doing good. I appreciate you having me. Holidays a little different this year, but everything's, we're good. Appreciate you having me on and ready to talk ball.
Yeah, it's been an interesting season for the Seattle Seahawks. So we're going to get into topics on Sam Darnold, what your expectations versus the reality of what this team was, because you were one of the few people that was a little bit higher on Seattle, especially coming out of the draft than most. We'll talk Wildcard Weekend, 49ers Seahawks round 3. And I'm going to get your thoughts on Clint Kubiak as well. And then we're going to ask everyone in the chat and have some questions and, things like that answered by yourself and by me. But before we get into that, guys, make sure, go to the Hawks Eyes YouTube channel, subscribe to that. And also, if you guys want awesome football analysis and breakdowns on all teams throughout the NFL, head on over to Garrett's page, follow up Football Analysis on YouTube. It's one of my go-to pages, and I'm sure you guys will love it too. So we'll get into that entire conversation right after this.
Fires to the end zone. Ball is caught. Touchdown! Seahawks are dunking it over the bar. Is Jackson Smith and Jigba. He's on the run. Wins 40. Pushes the man. 35. Look at him go. He's down to 20. 15. He can go. He is going to go. Touchdown Seahawks. Oh my word. A 67-yard run.
All right, Garrett. So let's talk about the Seattle Seahawks season. And it's not over, but I kind of want to get your thoughts on how Seattle did. 14-3, Sam Darnold, back-to-back 14-win seasons. And I know you got to reap the benefits of that last year in Minnesota. But what made you so positively outlooking on this team coming out of the draft, more so than the national media and stuff, who had Seattle pegged as a 7.5-win team in Vegas and also fourth or third place in this division? What do you think led to Seattle being this successful in year 2 of Mike Macdonald?
Well, it's exactly that. It's Mike Macdonald. I loved him as a hire when he was the defensive coordinator for the Ravens. And I mean, I appreciate you, giving me the flowers and everything. I've had a lot of wrong takes. Usually you get the wrong takes brought up more than the right one. But no, I loved Mike Macdonald. All of the Ravens players talked about how complex his system was, yet they talked about how good of a teacher he is, and then just the guy and the leader that he is in the locker room. I love Mike Macdonald, and I really thought that, especially after they brought in Nicky Manwari, that he was kind of that final piece to the defense, if you will. And Devin Witherspoon was one of my favorite prospects out of any of the past couple of years. Just a nasty, tough, in-your-face corner. And when you have Witherspoon and Manwari and all of the pass rushers Seattle has on the defense, especially Byron Murphy, who had a really good second year. I mean, this defense has playmakers all over. And with Sam Darnold, the biggest thing was, yes, he had Justin Jefferson last year. Yes, he had Kevin O'Connell, but he still played at a really high level last year. And I was still a believer. I mean, still am, obviously, but I was a believer in Jackson Smith-Njigba, and I've loved Zach Charbonnet since he came out of UCLA. And I was like, you know what? This is, for everybody that's underrating this team, I didn't understand why. This was one where I thought that, anywhere from 9 to 12 wins, and they certainly exceeded that. But this is a team that has not only a bright next couple of weeks ahead of them, but an extremely bright future as well.
Yeah, I think that's the interesting thing for me too, Garrett, when I look at this team, is I predicted them to be 13-4, but it was more off of, I figured they were going to get a couple of wins, maybe squeak out a couple, that maybe they didn't deserve to win. Like they didn't play well enough. And you know how teams get those wins throughout a season. But the thing for me is I feel like they're a year ahead of where they even thought they might be in this rebuild with Mike Macdonald. And I think it, to your point, is a testament to who Mike is as a coach. And I think the other person that needs to be in this conversation too is John Schneider. Like he is now basically retooled a franchise a second time around to being a team that has elite defense, a great offense that can, attack you in multiple ways, and set up for another potential couple years of Super Bowl opportunities. In this situation, like, who do you think gets more of the credit, or is it a 50-50 split between Mike and John Schneider?
I'd say from a national perspective, I'd say Macdonald I would say he gets more of the credit. That's where I feel like it goes by default. But I mean, you're right with the way that Seattle was drafted over the past couple of years. And I mean, it's just naming good football players, whether it's like we said, Eamon Maury or Witherspoon or Zach Charbonnet or Derek Hall or Grace Abel. There's times in the draft I refer to it as drafting good football players, meaning drafting guys that are solid floor guys, don't overthink it. Seattle's done a lot of that over the past couple of years, and this is the result. I mean, look at everything that they've accomplished this year, and even last year they missed the playoffs. They still had 10 wins, and to go 24-10 in the first 2 years under Mike Macdonald, while still having a lot of great players under the rookie contract window. I mean, that's where John Schneider should get a lot of credit, because not only did they draft Witherspoon and Charbonnet back in 23, but they also drafted Jackson Smith-Njigba, and this has been a rebuild / retool done the correct way the entire way.
So when you look at this team, and a lot of people have started to compare, hey, is this team going to be as good as what we had with the initial Pete Carroll dynasty that kind of showed up for a little bit there with the LOB? I feel this team's different, and I don't want to compare them at all to that era of Seahawks football because it's its own thing. But this defense, this dark side defense that's come out, when you look at some of these free agent acquisitions in a Tank Lawrence, for example, were you expecting him to have the impact he did this year for Seattle?
Maybe not this much, but I liked the signing when it was made simply because, again, I thought he was a veteran that knows his role. And there's times where I think players get a little undervalued in free agency by other teams, because there's times where it's like, guys, this is a player that knows how to win. This is a player that he plays an important position. And for Seattle to sign DeMarcus Lawrence to, I think it was maybe a 3 for $45 off the top of my head. I may be wrong on that, but I mean, that was one where it was like an average annual value of $15 million per year. He's every bit worth it. That was one where great signing. And Seattle, I mean, I do live on the East Coast, so I feel like there's a little bit of an East Coast bias, like not towards the West Coast, where maybe it was just kind of, we're probably not going to hear anything, but it was a really good signing. That was just one of probably a dozen great moves that John Schneider made this offseason.
Yeah, and you talked about Sam Darnold, and then Cooper Kupp obviously was the other kind of acquisition this offseason for Seattle. And I think some people look at Cooper Kupp and the value of his contract. Okay, is Cooper Kupp someone that's going to be on this team next year? I think he will be at a reworked value of his contract. But I think there's things Cooper Kupp brought to this team that may not show up directly by him being on the field. But you talked about JSN and what JSN's become this year. Basically, the number one receiver in the NFL this year. I think a lot of that is a byproduct of the in-receiver room coaching of a Cooper Kupp and such. What do you look at Cooper Kupp's value to this team when he got signed? Everyone thought it was a replacement for DK. I never looked at it that way. I looked at it as a replacement for Tyler Lockett. Do you think Cooper Kupp came in and kind of filled that role amicably this year?
For when he was on the field, I thought he was fine. But there's also Cooper Kupp, I feel like, is a little misconstrued nationally, because Cooper Kupp, if you look at his career path, obviously, I mean, the Triple Crown in 2021, he was, at the time, Jamar did it last year, but at the time, he was the first player to do it since 2005, which was Steve Smith. So I feel like there's a little bit of a national media like, oh my gosh, Cooper Kupp, and there's this name value to it. But Cooper Kupp, he's never been like a consistent player outside of that, or a consistently great player outside of that 1 year. So for what I thought should have been expected for Cooper Kupp, again, when he was on the field this year, I thought was about what he produced. Now, there's also guys that, I mean, the 2025 draft class, Torrey Horton, when he was on the field, Torrey Horton, it seemed like there for a couple of weeks in a row. I mean, it seemed like for 5 or 6 weeks in a row, it was just Torrey Horton's touchdown, which inevitably took targets away from Cooper Kupp. And then even with the acquisition of Rashid Shaheed midseason, another just chef's kiss acquisition there by John Schneider middle of the year. I thought for what Cooper Kupp was expected and what they asked of him, I thought he did a really solid job.
So there's 2 players I want to ask you about in this rookie class here that kind of fit into this offense. You brought one up there in Torrey Horton, and we're talking about a guy that had 6 touchdowns before his injury, 1 punt return, 5 receiving touchdowns. I thought after that Commanders game was really starting to take a hold on the receiver 2 position opposite JSN, runs into the injury that he did, and then they go get Rashid Shaheed to kind of still bring that speed element to this offense. The guy I want to ask you about is Elijah Arroyo, and he's potentially going to come back this week for the game versus the Niners. They have him designated to return. My question to you is, Garrett, they took and used a 2nd-round pick on him, and it never seemed like he fit this year in what they were trying to do offensively. There was something that wasn't working. Do you think that's more of Seattle maybe misinterpreted Arroyo and how he was going to fit in, or do you think it's just a player that still needs a year to get acclimated to playing at the NFL as a tight end and maybe some of the different requirements that are needed from the college game into the NFL game?
Yeah, I'd say a little bit of both, because he is what I think should be remembered is, I mean, a lot of these guys, and Elijah specifically is 22 years old. I mean, he went from Miami all the way to Seattle. I mean, that is the furthest that you can go in terms of distance. There's a lot of factors within a player having success, and there were a couple of plays that Elijah Arroyo had. I mean, he had less than 20 catches on the year, but there were 1 or 2 where it was like, hey, if he can continuously do this, I think one was on a Thursday night game against Arizona, if I recall correctly, but there were a couple of plays where it was like, you know, if we see the flashes at 22 years old, why can't he, you know, be a much better player at 23, 24 and be a more consistent guy? But it's not a bad situation for him to walk into when Sam Darnold throws for 4,000 yards and JSN has the year that he had. There shouldn't have been a lot of expectations for Arroyo, at least for me personally, just because tight ends not only have to adjust to being an NFL, what is essentially a receiver, because linebackers aren't, I mean, they're not just going to take the play off and say, hey, buddy, you know, you're a slower receiver. Let me just, you know, regather my legs on this play type thing to recuperate energy. So they have to be an NFL receiver, if you will, as well as an NFL blocker, because if you are a liability as an inline tight end and a guy that cannot, he can't you know, scoop, or he can't block the defensive end out of the play, or even at least chip him hard enough to have that, you know, an impact in the run game, then that's going to limit snaps. So for Elijah Arroyo, I think with the production from Tyler Warren, most recently Colston Loveland, and even the Browns Harold Fannin, that there may be some people that look at Arroyo nationally and say, what a disappointing rookie season. But whenever you provide the context with everything, it was probably underwhelming, yes. But I do think that there were a couple of plays here and there to really say, like, hey, I think that we have something here to build on in 2026 and in 2027.
Yeah, and that's how I look at it, because this is the first time I've looked at Seattle's tight end room for a while and been, yeah, this room is kind of more complete than it's been in the past. Obviously, we had Noah Fant. You had A.J. Barner as a rookie. A.J. Barner's turning in my opinion, to one of the more complete tight ends in the NFL from a blocking receiver standpoint. Eric Saubert fills a role as that blocking tight end and kind of, you know, backup basically. And Arroyo's kind of your X factor. And we're not even talking about Nick Callerup, who is a rookie this year, got some significant snaps as well when Saubert went down. So I'll ask you this to finish this part up here, Garrett. The reality of Seattle's playoff run. Do you think this team legitimately has enough to get to the Super Bowl and win it this year?
Easily, yes. Will they? It's a different question, but easily, yes. And there's the quote I feel like that gets circulated every time a team loses, or specifically when the Lions lose, that Dan Campbell said this may have been our only shot. Speaking from a competitive standpoint, you won 14 games, and I know you're playing the 49ers, but you know, their division rival. You obviously, each team knows each other well, but it's not every year that you're not going to get to play in the playoffs against George Kittle, Fred Warner, and Nick Bosa. And quite frankly, you have to take advantage of that. And, you know, I know there's a part of fans that say, you know, I want the best against the best. And it's unfortunate that those three specifically aren't playing, but it's not every year that you're going to have that what is a fortunate, good thing to have for Seattle from a competitive standpoint. So you have to win this game against San Francisco. I mean, this is a game where they're down 3 of their absolute best players, take advantage, and then you already beat the Rams, and the Bears to me they're a good team, obviously, but going into Seattle, Caleb Williams on the road, I can't say I like that matchup. So yes, they can absolutely get to the Super Bowl.
Yeah, and it'll be interesting what comes on the other side of that with the AFC, because this is one of the few years you kind of have only one quarterback that's proven over there in Josh Allen, to see who actually comes out of that side of things. But the question I want to get to, we kind of touched a little bit with quarterbacks here, Garrett, is the Sam Darnold debate. And what I mean by that is there is this ongoing debate on Sam. You know, he throws the ball, he turns it over. Is, in your opinion, Sam Darnold, by the definition now of what a top 10 NFL quarterback is Sam Darnold a top 10 NFL quarterback, or is he on the outskirts of that and kind of that tier 3 guy where like Mike Sando had him in his quarterbacking rank tiering program this offseason?
I'd probably say this is going to be this. I'd probably say 9 to 12, somewhere in there, 8, 9 to 12, somewhere in there, because Josh Allen, Mahomes, I mean, they're up there. I would, Lamar's up there, Stafford's up there. And then you can then have like 4 or 5 guys right in that next range of, hey, well, you could have him above him and then him above him. Even if you wanted to put Sam as high as 6 or 7, somewhere in there, by all means. But I think the quarterback discussion is way more wide open now than it was a year ago. And which I think is beneficial for the sport. I mean, I think it's good to have parity. I think it's good to have, hey, I have this guy above this guy. And you could have Sam, for me, anywhere in that 6, 7, 10, 12 area, somewhere in there. Because the reality is with Sam is there are times that, I mean, he had 14 interceptions this year. He finished 3rd in the NFL in interceptions. There's times where it's kind of like he gets just like lock eye vision on whoever he is playing, and it might happen once a game, but when it does, it seems like it's at an inopportune time whenever it happens, and that's for those plays to come up when they do, it stinks. But Sam Darnold at his peak, I mean, that Washington first half that he had this year was amongst the best halves of quarterback this decade. I mean, in the past 10 years. So Sam Darnold, I mean, the peaks are right up there with the best of them, but there's times where the valleys are a little lower than you'd like for a guy that should be in those top 6 or 7 or 8, 10 discussions.
And that's kind of how I've seen Sam this year, Garrett, is I see him as he can play as high as top 6 or number 6 on that list when he's on. And as we saw this year, he even went above that and got himself into that top 5 conversation. But I see him as that guy that's a top 10 quarterback, but he's hanging out between a 6 and a 10 area, and you don't know which week you're going to get in there. Like, obviously he had the bad game versus the Rams in SoFi where he throws 4 interceptions and has that dip in the valley. But when I look at, to your point, quarterback play in the NFL, and we look at how much more parity there is at the position than there has been for the last 10 years in some respects, you're going to have those numbers. It's going to be like, hey, the guy that's number 10 is going to have some great weeks and he's going to have that bad week. It's not before where you had Peyton and, Breeze and that whole Brady and that whole group where we were like, okay, the top 10 cemented and there's a reason they're all the top 10 guys in the NFL. And then there was like basically no middle class. It felt like it was a drop off to the guys that were, hey, we're talking about butt fumble Mark Sanchez and guys like that at the bottom of the pile and Jamarcus Russells and so on. Now it feels like, hey, there's this top echelon of 5 guys, which we talked about, Allen, Burrow, Mahomes, that group. And then there's this middle class from like 6 to 12. And then there's the tier below that. And then there's the bottom feeders. And I think Sam is in that middle class top, area starter where I think you can, and again, this is the other thing I want to get your thoughts on, Garrett, is franchise quarterback, the term. Everyone loves to throw it around. Is he a franchise guy? I feel that term also has changed on what a franchise quarterback is in a lot of ways from what it used to be when we talked about the Peytons and the Bradys and stuff. Has it changed for you at all?
It's a good question. I would say, I actually haven't really thought about it. I would say no, because I feel like I feel like you look at a franchise quarterback, he's the guy. And for me, Sam fluctuates at times where there could be 6 or 8 games in a row where Sam is on a roll, right? But if you had to ask me right now, is Sam Darnold a franchise quarterback? Yes. Is, Dak Prescott a franchise quarterback? Yes. Is Jordan Love? Yes. And that's nobody would rank, Sam, Dak, or Jordan in that, Allen Mahomes tier, even though, I would still consider them a franchise quarterback. So I would say probably yes, in terms of, has it changed a little bit? But I think it's a little more loose, but I think in a good way, because I feel like when I was growing up, it was like every year you'd have the Colts or Patriots, one of them would go 12 or 13-0. You'd start out and you were just waiting for Brady and Manning in the playoffs. And then everybody was kind of like the second class. And it's not like that now, which I think is better for everyone.
And so I'm in the exact same boat. The way I've kind of started looking at it in a way is you have your 5 top elite franchise quarterbacks. That's how I add that term, elite franchise quarterback. And then you have, like you said, the Daks, the Jordan Loves, the Sam Darnolds, the Justin Herberts, in a way, like these guys that are franchise quarterbacks that, yeah, you can go to a Super Bowl with them. They aren't the guys that are necessarily going to be able to carry your team week in and week out to get there, but they can win you a Super Bowl. Like Joe Flacco at a point was a franchise quarterback. The thing for me, though, is like to your point about the Peyton and the Brady part of it, it was like, yeah, we've got those guys and that group of 10, and then everybody else is just a game manager. And you kind of, that was the term that got thrown around all the time. Game managing quarterback. Well, he's just an above average starting quarterback. It's like the fact now that we have this discussion where it's like there's an elite level franchise quarterback and then there's franchise quarterbacks. I think to your point, yeah, it does bring more parity and it makes the league more interesting when we have overall better quarterback play throughout. Because when I look at this year, like you can go to the teams like the Browns, the Jets, and go, yeah, they've got a quarterback issue, even to a point, the Raiders, and we won't really go on to that topic because that was not a great successful season after some of the things that happened there. But the majority, like you look at the NFC West, Stafford, Purdy, and Sam, 3 great franchise starting quarterbacks. You go to, the AFC East. You go and look at the NFC North now. You've got, I'm not sure what Minnesota is doing, so I'll let you fill that part in. But, you got Minnesota that's trying to figure it out, but then you got the Caleb Williams, the Jordan Loves, the Jared Goffs. Like, those are all franchise starting quarterbacks, and it makes this league so much more interesting when it's there. And it's the reason I brought it up, because I know for you, it's something that you talk about, at a good amount on your show. But this is just something for me where I wanted to bounce the idea, because I thought I was going crazy when everyone's like, no, Sam's not top 10 or in that bracket, and he's not a franchise quarterback. And I'm going like, well, what more does the guy really need to do to be in that category? No,
he definitely is. I mean, he's definitely there. That whole like Dak, Baker, Sam, Jordan Love, Herbert. They're all in that, I would say, in that same tier, all in that same. So yeah, Sam to me definitely in that discussion for sure. I mean, it's not. Trust me, you want to see bad quarterback play? We had it this year. It's he's definitely in that discussion for sure.
So, Garrett, you on your channel cover the whole NFL. What did you make of this Wildcard Weekend? Because it was an interesting one for a lot of reasons outside of the one game with the Patriots and the Chargers, which was a bit of a dud, and even Houston, Pittsburgh last night until the second half was a bit of a dud as well.
Yeah, the biggest thing, and ironically, the games you mentioned that were like duds, I would say that those hammered home the biggest message across the NFL is you can have your receivers in the first round, your corners, whatever. It does not matter if you can't do anything up front. And Justin Herbert he was sacked 6 times, hit several other times. And Aaron Rodgers last night, there was a point where, he's 42 years old, so I'm going to give him a little bit of grace there. I would not want a prime Will Anderson at 24 years old, hit sticking me when I'm 42. I'm only 27, and I can't imagine another 15 years on that. But whenever your offensive line cannot block at all, it doesn't matter. And it's not a coincidence that the Steelers and Chargers combined for 9 total points because they couldn't do anything up front. So, it was cool to see Bryce Young come up in the fourth quarter and I would say play pretty well, all things considered, considering the adversity that he's dealt through the first couple of years of his career. It was awesome to see the Bears come back down 18 points. It was, the city of Chicago is a great sports town. Whenever the city of Chicago is bumping and electric, awesome place to be. It was awesome to see that. But in terms of like true takeaways, I guess you could also say that special teams are, you can't have a poor special teams in the postseason and expect to go far. The Packers would be a good example of that. But offensive line will always out trump everything. And if you were ever mocked an offensive lineman in a mock draft, I mean, unless the value is off where you're drafting the 70th best player at the 20th overall pick, it's not a bad thing to invest with the big boys.
Yeah, and I looked at this weekend, Garrett, and it kind of reaffirmed a couple things for me. Defense holds up in the playoffs, it always will, and being able to control the ball with the run game and, be able to get your explosives when they matter. And that's the thing I looked at when you saw the Patriots game. Like, the Patriots in that game versus the Chargers, they completely controlled the line of scrimmage. Herbert was thrown around like a rag doll, very much to what Aaron Rodgers was. It was like both of them were dumped, in my opinion, in a Shark Tank. And it was like, hey, fend for yourselves. Like, see what happens, guys. And, you looked at, how New England won that game with Vrabel, which, by the way, I've said this for a while. If Seattle hadn't hired Mike Macdonald, Mike Vrabel was the next guy on my list to come into Seattle and to build what he's built in New England in a lot of ways. But you look at that team, they are playing complementary football. And even Buffalo against Jacksonville, which I thought was one of the more interesting games this weekend, because going into the playoffs, was actually quite high on what Jacksonville had been doing, very much like Houston. They were on a roll. Trevor Lawrence looks like he's figured it out there with Udinsky and Cohen and how to operate in that offense. But Buffalo has the X factor of Josh Allen. And he's the only team really that I think, outside of maybe the Rams, can say they've got kind of a quote-unquote X factor in Stafford. But really, Josh Allen is an X factor. What did you make of the Bills-Jacksonville game, and especially like Buffalo's defense? Is it a defense that can get them to a Super Bowl?
Man, I don't know. I will say I want to credit Buffalo's defense in a big way, because they played a lot better and they were throwing a lot of different looks at Trevor than I was expecting. And that was a game where, I mean, everybody, obviously we live in the quarterback league, and if your quarterback doesn't perform in the postseason, then he stinks. He's a choker, the whole thing. There were a lot of people that were saying if Josh Allen doesn't get to the Super Bowl this year, then he never will, because, specifically Mahomes and Lamar both aren't in the postseason, and Burrow too. But I look at the Bills roster, and I was heading into the game, I was like, guys, this is not a good roster. And then people automatically go to oh, great, you're already forming excuses for Josh Allen. But his top 5 receivers were in the game were Khalil Shakir, Brandon Cooks, Keon Coleman, Dawson Knox, and Dalton Kincaid. It's not, I mean, we're not talking about like Jamar Chase and T. Higgins and Mike Gesicki the way that, we're talking about Brandon Cooks and Keon Coleman in the year 2025, right? So the thing with the Bills defense, and to go back to this, is they made timely plays. They threw a lot of different coverages at Trevor, and they can beat the Broncos. Is that going to be an easy game? Absolutely not. Going out to Denver is, I mean, that's a tough matchup for anybody, because that's, it's already the elevation. You're already going to Denver in January. You're going from Jacksonville to Denver. But Denver's offense does not scare me the way that Jacksonville's offense scared me heading into the postseason, because Jacksonville was on an 8-game win streak entering January. They were averaging 33.6 points per game. And I do think Bo Nix gets a little disrespected at times in the national media, because people throw out that game manager label and that he's just, riding the ship, and they dismiss everything that he does. But Buffalo, there's no reason to think that they can't beat any of Denver, New England, or Houston to be able to get to the Super Bowl and to be able to finally have Josh Allen and the Bills playing the big game.
Yeah, and that was interesting too. I agree with you on the fact that you saw Buffalo come out with so many exotic things. Like McDermott was really kind of seeming to be like, okay, we almost got to throw everything but the kitchen sink at this to try and get us some momentum defensively. Because I agree with you, that offense outside of Josh Allen and James Cook doesn't really have anything going for it. And it's kind of a scary thing where I'm looking now, like, is Josh Allen going to turn, into some respects, like Aaron Rodgers did for those years in Green Bay, is going like, please get me a receiver. Please bring me and draft me a receiver so I can have some weapons and stop asking me to do basically everything with nothing. The other thing I wanted to kind of, get your thoughts on was the Houston game. So yes, Houston, goes into Pittsburgh. They potentially end Aaron Rodgers' NFL career in a way with how we don't know what he's going to do this offseason. But that defense with Danielle Hunter and Will Anderson coming off the edges and the way they're playing, like when I look at the other side of the conference from a Seattle Seahawks perspective, that defense is the closest defense, I would say, outside of Denver as well, that rivals what Seattle's built over here on the NFC side. But what's going on with that offense? Because it seems like CJ Stroud, we talk about Sam Darnold kind of being this up and down quarterback at points. He has his, ups and down moments, but CJ Stroud, outside of that rookie year, he seems to have kind of come a bit down to earth in a way and even below it.
Yeah, the thing with CJ last night is, I'm going to be honest, I have no idea what a couple of those plays were. A couple of those fumbles, the one interception in the red zone, I just looked at the screen and I just said, like, CJ, what are you doing? Like, what are you seeing here? You know better. You're a third-year NFL pro. You've won multiple playoff games, won his third playoff game last night. Didn't do a whole lot within that game to win the playoff game, but a win's a win nonetheless. But it was, I would say in 2024, the offensive line was not great. His offensive coordinator was fired after the season. So I thought CJ in 24 played a lot better than the raw numbers would suggest. But last night specifically, within that playoff game, there's times to go back to, we mentioned this with Darnold, this very much applies to CJ Stroud as well, and several other players, where there's times where I have no idea what they're seeing, what the thought process is. And I would argue that last night was probably, maybe outside of the Seattle game, granted, it's a little bit of a different defense playing Seattle's defense versus the Steelers defense. So that's kind of, expected, if you will, but it was probably the worst game he played, again, outside of against what is the best defense in the NFL, or maybe the second best if you have the Texans above. We're on a Seahawks channel, so we'll say the best. I have no idea what CJ Stroud was doing. Long answer short, I have no idea what he was doing. I have no idea what he was seeing in some of those plays. A couple of the fumbles, it seemed like it was very much just like, hey, here you go. Like, I'm just going to, oh no, I accidentally dropped the football. I have no explanation as to why the decisions were made when they were.
The one interception he threw coming out of halftime, where they basically were like on this heater on that drive. They went down the field, running the ball, first down after first down, barely got into a third and long, I think, even on that drive, or even a third down for that matter. And then they get inside the 20, and there's that pass play, and he's moving around in the pocket, and it's like, okay, just take off, run it, or throw that ball out the back of the end zone and live for the next down. And he throws this awkward pass to the back end, I think of Marks' feet, that's interception. It's like, you can't make those mistakes in a playoff game. Now, again, you're granted having an elite level defense, but against a Drake May or, even a Josh Allen at that point, guys like that are going to make plays and potentially it's going to come back to bite you. And those are some of the things I kind of worry a little bit with Sam, is just like, don't make that play. Just eat the ball, kick the field goal, put your defense out there. Don't give it where you lose all momentum in that situation.
Definitely agree. And I don't want this to sound like mean or dismissive to Sam, because he's had some really high moments this year. I don't want it to come across as jealous Vikings fan. I'm happy for Sam. He did everything the right way with Minnesota. He went to the West Coast, got more money than we were offering. Couldn't be happier for Sam. But if Sam simply does not turn the ball over in any postseason game this year, I'd be hard-pressed to think that the Seahawks don't, at minimum, get to the Super Bowl. Sam, all he has to be as a game manager, they should get to the Super Bowl. And also, one of the things that you asked earlier about one of the biggest takeaways, what did you learn from Wildcard Weekend? I think there's times where if you just take the points, given that, you're on a consistent clock ticking to the end of the game, just take the points, don't overthink it. The Chargers didn't take the points early in the game. Who knows what would have transpired after that? They had a bad game all around, but sometimes just take the points. That also applies to Jacksonville, who tried to go up 14-3 early in the game, could have went up 10-3. They ended up losing by a field goal. Who knows how those games play out? But take the points, don't overthink it, and live to see your, especially with Seattle, live to see your defense go out there.
Yeah, and that's the kind of thing, even when Seattle played San Francisco a few weeks ago, it was like, you get down there on that opening drive, you get down to the 1 yard line, don't run, spider, Y2 banana, in that case, widow with the running back. Just hand the ball off to Charbonnet. He's already got double digits from running the ball in from short yardage. Or at that point, when you got to fourth down, maybe take the points there, especially with the playoffs. But let's kind of talk about this matchup, Garrett, a little bit, because I know it's one that you're interested in for sure. What do you make of round 3 of these two teams, and how different do you think this game could be than what we saw in week 18 and definitely what we saw in week 1 when these two teams met?
There's a couple things. Week 1, I mean, I understand why Seahawks fans do not like him. He's a playmaker. He is I don't know if he's going to have the accolades, but in terms of sheer talent, Nick Bosa is a Hall of Fame talent. He is when he's healthy, one of the best pass rushers in football. Obviously, he's not playing. So there's substantial difference between week 1 and then, week 18 and now. Obviously, no Fred Warner, no George Kittle. With how good Seattle's defense is, with another week of rest, with how well that Mike Macdonald knows Kyle Shanahan, I would be surprised if we don't see something not exact, because they kind of took their lunch money in week 18. They went down to, the phrase that's used is walk in your trap, take over your trap. That's kind of the hip phrase now. They did that in week 18. I'd be surprised if we see it to that level in the wild card round, but the Seattle defense is, I think it's one of the best in the past couple of years. This one, the last year's Eagles, but then before that, this is a really, really, really complete defense. And without George Kittle, they haven't had Brandon Ayuk all year. It's going to be Brock Purdy, Christian McCaffrey, Trent Williams hold down the left side, and Kyle Shanahan, you're going to have to coach probably the best game of your career to be able to beat this team. With coming off a week rest in this situation, Lumen Field's going to be rocking. Good luck.
And that's kind of the interesting thing, because losing George Kittle, I think, might be the biggest loss for this team in a lot of ways. One, he's that emotional kind of fire starter for them in a lot of ways. And two, he, as we know with this offense, Clint runs it to an extent in Seattle here, but your tight end's super important in those blocking assignments, in those chip and release assignments, and just even running those over routes in this offense off of play action. And I get they've got some viable guys in behind that are good backups, but they're no George Kittle. And if Ricky Pearsall doesn't play, that puts this game solely on Brock Purdy and Christian McCaffrey. And I get Juwan Jennings is a nice, serviceable receiver, but he's not a guy that I'm sitting there with Devin Witherspoon, Reek Woolen, Nick Eamon-Wari, or even Josh Jobe and going, yeah, I'm concerned that, I would just say to one of them, hey, just lock up Jennings. It's fine. Go play man on him. We can handle the rest, kind of a thing on our own end. But the thing for me with this matchup, Garrett, when I look at it, is I go, how are the 49ers going to move the ball consistently on this defense? That's the $1 million question, because the one thing I'll say is the flip side of it is everyone's going to say, well, look at what Robert Saleh did against the Philadelphia Eagles and, that offense and stuff. And the thing I'll say is I think the Philadelphia Eagles had a legitimate horrible play caller this year. The guy might, be able to design plays in a playbook, but calling the plays, they look completely, discombobulated this year in a lot of ways, given the talent they had. I don't see that with Clint Kubiak. And I think the interesting thing in that Seattle game in week 18 is Seattle left probably 17 points on the field that day. And it's one of those things where I don't feel that'll happen again. I feel like this game the score will not be 13-3. I think the Niners will get some of their moments. It's bound to happen. It's playoff football. But I just don't know how on either side the Niners are going to be able to stay with Seattle for full 4 quarters.
No, and I'm with you. And this is, I'm not even just saying this just to get the Seahawks fans excited on your channel. This is one of the most complete teams. And I hate to even talk about this. The only way that I see it being, that close, it can be a close game. I don't want to say it's going to be a 21-point blowout, but if Seattle's going to have to make mistakes, because I fully expect them to be locked in, loaded. George Kittle is that 6th offensive lineman. You also said it, he's a great locker room guy. Devin Witherspoon, Reek Woolen, that secondary, that pass rush, good luck, man. And even 2 weeks ago, they put up 173 yards and 9 first downs in a 60-minute game with the 1 seed on the line. So you're telling me now that they're coming off they already played a game while the Seahawks are coming off rest. Seattle should comfortably win this game.
The interesting thing for me on this in a lot of ways too, Garrett, is the San Francisco media complaining about this game being a Saturday night game and saying, oh, this is unfair. The 1 seed has played on the Saturday night for, I think, the last 5 or 6 years of the NFC in the divisional round, or ever since they moved to this new format with the extra team. It's kind of what you're afforded for finishing first overall. Would the 49ers be complaining about the game being on Saturday if they were sitting as the 1 seed? Right. Probably not. And so it's one of those things that I find kind of interesting. I want to talk to you about the running backs in this game for Seattle and the way that Seattle seems to have found their running identity, which is kind of what we were all expecting them to be coming out of the preseason, but they turned into this aerial show for the first, half of the season with JSN and Sam throwing the ball over the yard. What do you think's changed for Seattle to be so effective running the ball the last, I'd say month of the season so far here?
Yeah, so early in the season, it was, this is a season seems like it's forever ago. Like that opener against San Francisco and then the Pittsburgh game. And I remember back in week one of Kenneth Walker Charbonnet had, it was like, I don't know, maybe like 10 carries, 60 yards. The other had like 7 carries for like, I'm not exaggerating, 5 yards. And then it was flipped the following week. It was whichever one, had the bad game, had the good game. And over the past month, I really think that Clint Kubiak it's just everything's opened up. The Seahawks are, you get to this point of the year where teams are not 100% physically, despite what, may be said. And this is also a big emphasis as to why I love having 2 good running backs, because Christian McCaffrey, Saquon Barkley, those guys are outliers. There's a reason both of those players were selected in the top 7 of their drafts, Saquon specifically at number 2 overall. I'm a big believer in building good football teams and seeing the process through 17 games. There's times where it may take a little longer throughout the season that we saw at Seattle. And that's also a great point that you have with the run game improving the way that it has, along with Seattle's great defense. Specifically, what changed over the past couple of weeks, they've just become more efficient. And what I think was really impressive with the Week 18 game against San Francisco was they ran for 180 yards as a team. They didn't have Charles Cross in there. And then, Charles Cross was just given that big $100 million extension. And to be able to go into an opposing rival's stadium, 1 seat on the line, rush for 180 yards, hold them to 3 points. This is a dominant football team. And what specifically changed was just becoming more efficient over the past couple of weeks and not giving up despite having opportunities early in the year to kind of abandon the run game early.
So the thing I wanted to ask you about that is, with that run game and those particular running backs, Charbonnet and Ken Walker we're talking about here. Ken Walker, I think, surprised a lot of people by actually going over the 1,000-yard mark this year, because it never seemed like he really had – he had a couple like breakout-ish games, but never really anything of substantial until kind of the last few games of the regular season here. I'm going to put you on the spot here. Do you think Ken Walker is re-signed in Seattle next year? Or do you think he goes somewhere else in free agency?
It's a good question. And I would say no, but there's also a part of me where it's like, he's going to have a great chance to extend his career because Charbonnet's there to take some of the load off Kenneth Walker. So it's like, it's a really beneficial situation. It's a situation where, there's times where, the money is way too good for guys to pass up. But if the opportunity for Kenneth Walker would be, hypothetically, just don't take these numbers for exact, but if it was 2 for 20 or 2 for 22 somewhere else, average annual value of $10 million per year, I think it would be way more beneficial for Kenneth Walker to stay at home and take a $2 million discount to be able to also extend his career beyond that 2-year contract. So I kind of said a lot to not say anything. I'm going to say, I'm going to say yes. I'm going to say he stays.
Now, I'll give you one other player on this, because I love getting your opinions on these Garrett, and the other one is Riq Woolen.
I would say no. I that is one I actually would say no, because I know there's been a lot of ups and downs with Riq Woolen. It seemed every week for the past weeks 1 through 9 for the past 2 years, even this year, trade deadline, Riq Woolen, trade deadline, Riq Woolen. And I feel like no. I feel like that some team, especially because of, and he's kind of a weird player, like for how tall, for how athletic he is, he in some ways doesn't play the way that you would think, like at least based on the physical archetype that he is, stylistically speaking. But I would say no. I think some team will basically throw the kitchen sink at him, and it's going to be too good for him to pass up and to basically say, look, guys, thank you for everything, but I can't turn down when something is, $10 or $15 million more total to stay here.
Yeah, I'd love Riq to stay. I think he's played better and finally adapted to Mike Macdonald's defense this back half of the season. But I think it's one of those things where I think, if someone comes at him with hey, we're going to pay you in the top 4 of the NFL at the position, it's going to be hard for Seattle when, to your point, they're going to have to pay Devin Witherspoon, who is right now that he's been able to play outside with Nicky Manwari, I think has proven that he is probably one of the top outside corners in the NFL here. So the last kind of thing I wanted to touch on here with you, Garrett, before we get into the 2-minute drill and before we get to all the comments and questions that are being put in the chat right now. So again, if anyone's in the chat and wants to get a question into Garrett or myself, make sure you guys put the name of the person you want to ask the question to, and then write the question so we know to get those on the screen and in. And super chats always get priority. Clint Kubiak, and I had to ask you about this. What do you make of the Clint Kubiak situation? First off, do you think he's ready to be a head coach in the NFL? Second, how likely do you think it is that he becomes one in this cycle?
First, I would say yes. And then second, I would also say, I would say 99% that he becomes a head coach, because there's a part of this to say you only live once. You have to take the opportunities when they're in front of you. And a quarter of the league needs head coaches, because there were a couple of firings, John Harbaugh, Mike Tomlin. I mean, everybody knew that, Brian Callahan in Tennessee, and then Brian Dable in with the New York. But then there were a couple of other firings. Mike McDaniel with the Dolphins, and the Falcons, they moved on from Raheem Morris. And there's a couple of more. But I think that this is very much a quarter of the league is open. This is as hot as the iron will probably get for you. You kind of have to strike while the iron's hot. And by the way, I was going to say, this also plays into why the Dan Campbell, to go back to, like, this may be our best shot, because from a competitive standpoint, like I said, with the 3 big Niners players down, the 1 seed for Seattle, and then also I'm not trying to be negative here, but you're not going to have a Clint Kubiak every single year. Now, you have Mike McDonald on the defensive side of the ball, but you're not going to have that offensive mastermind every single year. And whenever you do, that's the reality that good coordinators become head coaches. So that all plays into the overarching message of win now.
Yeah, no, I agree. And from what I've been hearing is there's a potential opportunity that's already kind of almost a done deal, given of when the playoffs end for Seattle, that he's probably out the door. Now, the question I want to ask you is the trickle-down effect of that, right? Because when Clint came to Seattle, he brought John Benton and Rick Dennison and out in here, and basically 3/4 of his offensive staff from New Orleans to this situation in Seattle. So what do you think happens there? Do you think they all jettison with him to wherever he goes? And also, who are some names you think could come back in for Seattle, whether they're in-house or out in the circle right now, and be the next offensive coordinator that won't throw too much of a curveball into what they've already started to build here with Sam and with this offensive line and that continuity?
So the first part of that question, I would be surprised if they didn't go with him, considering, like, they already uprooted once from New Orleans to go to Seattle. And at that point, you're also probably going to get a substantial pay raise, because you're probably going to go from, like a run game coordinator to maybe an OC/assistant head coach. So there's probably also, I don't know what the exact pay bump would be, but I'm guessing probably like 2 or 3x what you're already making. So I feel like they would go with them. Now, I will be honest, I'm not like the most qualified to say, like, this quarterback coach is going to be the next guy. Now, I did know that last year with Grant Udinski going down to Jacksonville to be their OC, and he's a really, like, hot shot next head coach candidate. But I would like to think it would be somebody that is already with, like an O'Connell or Shanahan, somebody already in that system, like a disciple, if you will, of any of those guys that's already a quarterback coach, that's the next one up, and that you could basically look at their resume, get a lot of positive feedback from the head coaches, do your homework on, hey, how smart is this guy? What impact did he have on the day-to-day operation? Can he call plays? What is his philosophy? I would think it would be something like a quarterback coach already that is with one of those teams that run a system very similar to what Clint Kubiak and the Seahawks have ran this year.
Yeah, it's one of those interesting things where I don't want Seattle to have to keep, and it's unfortunate, I don't want them to have to keep going through this, right? You want to get some stability on the offensive side, because if Clint does leave, that's 2 OCs in 2 years for Mike McDonald at the start of this, regime for him. The one name that I've heard rumblings out there about, potentially because of his ties to John Schneider, and maybe a guy that is done being a head coach, is Mike McCarthy. as an OC, because you wouldn't be looking at him being the next hot shot, to your point, head coach kind of guy. He's called plays. He's struggled as a head coach for the last bit of time, but has ties to John Schneider. John Schneider values him. And maybe that's a guy that you look at where, hey, we can do kind of what Andy Reid did in Kansas City with Spagnuolo, where it's like, hey, I'll give you top end coordinator money because I know you're not going to go anywhere for a job because you're done being a head coach, kind of a thing.
That I'm actually really glad you tossed the Spagnuolo part in there, because when you brought up Mike McCarthy, that was immediately what I thought of. If you can get that old guy that still is obviously very beneficial to the organization, even Vic Fangio in Philly, that if you can find that guy, that's obviously your best case scenario, because what the Seahawks will probably go through if they continue to have the success they have, and Darnold continues to be that guy, is what Baker Mayfield and the Bucs have went through over the past couple of years, whether it is Dave Canales, whether it is Liam Cohen, and this year they fired Josh Grizzard, their now former offensive coordinator. That's the trade-off of having a great OC and having a successful year offensively. Is it worth it when you are the 1 seed and winning 14 games? Yes, but that's also part of, that comes with success.
Yeah, and that's kind of the thing that, to your point, and this is where the mantra now about hiring the defensive-minded coach is, you get a good OC, like, he's gone. And the league is trying to find their next McVay, their next Shanahan. Interesting comment here, though, and I wanted to get your thoughts on this. HMY comes in and says, Josh McCown is an interesting candidate for Seahawks OC. What are your senses on McCown? Because I know he doesn't call the plays correct. It's Kevin O'Connell that calls the plays. Do you think he's someone that could potentially be lured away with that title change and getting the ability to call plays, or do you think he really wants to stay around with Kevin?
No, I think he absolutely could, especially you get that big pay raise, you get that next level up. And there's an interview Ben Johnson had where it was basically, when I started at a positions coach, I was all in on that. And then, I became really good at that. And then I wanted to become a play caller and then, eventually become a head coach. I can't tell you about Josh McCown's makeup, but that in theory does make sense. And he is obviously very familiar with Sam Darnold, and it would be a really, really enticing offer for him to be Seattle's offensive coordinator, especially when you factor in all of the pieces that Seattle has to work with. So that's a good call out. That is somebody that, like I said, a quarterback's coach that is, an O'Connell, Shanahan, McVay, somebody that's already like familiar. That's a great call out. That is a prime example of what I'm referring to for a guy that would be a good example of the next guy up for Seattle's play caller.
Yeah, it's one of those things, again, where I look at it and I go, I'd love to see it, but then how long do you have him before he runs a great offense and he's gone and you're doing this whole search again? So it's kind of one of those things where you got to kind of start weighing that, because the one thing too, I think, when we talk about this, Garrett, is the fact that, you look at a Grant Udinski, he's going to be a guy, he's already getting head coaching opportunities. It looks like in interviews this year, and he still hasn't called plays yet at the NFL level. But he, to your point, is talked about as this, basically, I think one of the quotes I saw was, he's the type of guy that would take a car apart and then put it back together just to put it through a car wash. Like, he's that type of guy in the way that he's made up. But when I look at, Sam Darnold and the familiarity he has with the West Coast scheme that, Shanahan and this group run, I don't know if you go hire an OC that's a far departure from that, because now you're really putting Sam in a bit of a, I think, bind, because we've seen what Sam, and you don't want to take a deep departure from that.
I completely agree. That's why I think you should stick with what's working. There's no point in switching up what's working at the level that it is.
All right, Garrett. So let's do this. 2-minute drill. You're going to get 12 questions, 1 bonus question. You've done this before. You get 1 timeout, but there's going to be 6 Seahawkish kind of related questions and then 6 NFL wide ones. So that way you can bring your NFL expertise here. So question 1 for the 2-minute drill. One Seahawk who raised his national stock the most in 2025 and why?
I feel like it's got to be Jackson Smith-Njigba, probably a basic pick, but he was viewed I know he didn't. The rookie year was really weird. It was kind of like wait till 2024, and then 2024 it was, oh, he had a good year. He's probably going to be a 1,000-yard receiver, good for the 23 class, and but he's not going to be Puka Nacua because Puka's the guy at 23. And then this year he goes, he has the year that he has, and oh yeah, he is a top 5 receiver in the NFL. He is that guy. It's got to be JSN.
Okay, question 2: biggest concern you still have about Seattle heading into this divisional round?
I'm really confident in this divisional round. The biggest concern I have is more for the NFC Championship. And I'll say look ahead. That's it.
Okay. Question 3: has Sam Darnold proven he's the long-term QB solution in Seattle, or does he still need to prove it after another season?
I would say 1,000,000% yes.
Okay. Question 4: one rookie you trust the most in a high-leverage playoff moment?
Nicky Manwari.
Okay. Question 5: if Seattle wins versus San Francisco, what will be the deciding factor in that victory?
Defense.
Okay. Question 6: which Seahawks unit is the most playoff ready right now? Offense, defense, or special teams?
Defense, definitely.
Okay. Now we'll move over to the NFL side of things for you here, Garrett. Question 7: most dangerous team left in the playoffs that people aren't talking enough about?
I'm going to say, I feel like everybody's getting talked about. Pass or time. Would like to come back to it.
Time out. Okay. Time out. Okay. Question 8: QB under the most pressure this postseason and why?
I would say Sam Darnold because of all of the narratives. You 6 interceptions, 2 games against the Rams. Is he going to be that guy? Is he going to see ghosts? I mean, you know what? This year, Sam has a bad game. The first thing you get brought up, the first thing you see blasted in your face across social media is ghosts. It's Sam Darnold.
Okay. Question 9: one coaching matchup this weekend that could swing a game.
I would say that could swing a game. I would say Sean. Oh man, you know what? I'm going to say Sean Payton against the Bills defense. I don't feel confident with that one. That's a tough one.
Okay, I'll let you come back to that one because that is a tough one. Question 10: a wild card takeaway or weekend takeaway that will matter more in the divisional round.
Defense and trench play. Like it's going to be even hammered more home the further that we get into the postseason.
Okay. Question 11: which team left has the smallest margin for error?
I would say Denver. They're playing an MVP quarterback in Josh Allen, and then they get Drake May or the Texans defense if they beat Josh Allen.
Okay. Question 12: one playoff narrative you think is being overrated or misunderstood?
Overrated playoff narrative. I would say, shoot, these are good questions, man. Overrated playoff narrative. Okay. It's the Broncos offense and that Bo Nix is just basically this guy that's like riding a tricycle and that he's just like everybody that discredits Bo Nix every step of the way. I would say that.
Okay. So now we'll go back to the other two. So you had most dangerous team left in the playoffs that people aren't talking enough about.
I'm going to say the Texans because they played as bad as they could have offensively, still won by 24. Granted, a lot of those points were, final 10 minutes of the game, but they played terrible, still won by 20 points.
Okay. And then the other one was one coaching matchup this weekend that could swing a game.
Actually, I got it. Sean McVay versus Dennis Allen.
Ooh, okay. Okay, like that one. One in the chat that was good is Kubiak versus Saleh as well.
I do like that. But I love McDonald versus a Kittle-less Shanahan Moore. Like in favor of Seattle.
That is very true. Okay, so your bonus question. Who wins the Super Bowl and what's the one reason they get it done?
Seattle's defense. Seattle and their defense. That's good luck. Just watch them. Just it's like a ferocious pack that's always around the football.
All right. Well, that's the 2-minute drill, Garrett. You did quite well on that one.
Appreciate it.
Sorry, some of the questions had to be that detailed, but I got to give you a bit of a challenge. I can't give you just softballs the whole time.
You're good. Yeah.
All right. So with that being said, let's get into the talk with the 12s, and we've got even some 49er fans in the chat, so that's always good to have them kicking around in here. First one we got is from unknown user, BM, I think 5HJ for the $2 donation. Goes, damn, I was wrong last time. The Niners didn't win. Appreciate you coming back and owning up to that, man, after thinking they were going to win the last time. It'll be interesting to see what happens this weekend on Saturday. So we've got Nick in here, goes, I'm a little nervous about D-Law showing up on the injury report with an Achilles. Yeah, that did happen today. So that'll be an interesting one. What else we got? Oh, here we go. We've got HIA in here. Goes, great channel, Garrett. Really enjoy the content.
Give the hat tip. Give the hat tip. Appreciate it.
Anyone that hasn't, get on over to Garrett's page, Football Analysis on YouTube here. It is by far one of the best sites for pure football content for anyone that is a diehard fan of the game. We've got Chris coming in. Smoke Hawk goes, franchise QB has changed. It used to be a guy who could carry a team every year. Now it's just a guy who doesn't make you lose. Do you think that's a fair way of looking at it now, Garrett?
I would, yeah. I mean, there's some truth to it. I would say, there's like yin and yang. There's some truth. There's some truth in there for sure. I just think that I think it was so much perfectionist. Oh well, this guy's not going to go, and I feel like this is also a part of people having more of a voice in the media. Where growing up, it was pretty much like, whoever's in the room with you is who you're arguing with. And it was like, oh, well, they give like the arms crossed. Well, guess what, buddy? Phillip Rivers isn't going into Foxborough and beating Tom. He's not a franchise quarterback. And it'd be like one of those answers. So it's just, you know what I mean? I feel like I was a little bit,
oh yeah,
but it was like, that's what it, like 20 years ago when I was growing up, I feel like that's what it was.
Oh, it completely was. And it was the conversation I always used to love, Garrett, was the one when you would like do fantasy draft in Madden mode, again, playing video games. And it was like, who's going to get their top quarterbacks? And you're arguing about, who's the better 99 over. It's like,
right.
Okay, it's a little bit different now, like to the point with the national media and all the content creators, that conversation's definitely gotten a lot larger. CK Seahawk in here goes, Sam is still learning. He's going to be great when he puts it all together, in my opinion. I think that's a fair point to mention. Sam's still only 28 years old. Like, he's been in this league now for 6 years, I think it is, or 7 years.
7, yeah.
He's got more starts than most guys. Like, most guys come out at 23, 24. He came out at 21 and, let's be honest, got sent to probably the worst franchise to start an NFL career as a quarterback and found a way around it. And then Smoke Seahawk comes back in with Darnold is more like Brett Favre than any QB today. What do you make of that comment?
Honestly, I would say the guy that plays for Favre's franchise is more, just because Jordan Love at times, there's times where Jordan Love will throw, he'll throw an interception. I mean, this also applies to Sam. There's times where Sam throws interceptions where you're like, Sam, like, what are you doing? That also, no offense, sorry. I lived it. It happens. But it also applies to Jordan Love as well, where there's interceptions where it's like, dude, like, where are we throwing the football? What is the thought process? I would say those two are definitely that gunslinger-esque.
The one for me with Darnold is I feel like he's so there's 3 quarterbacks I compare Darnold to where I'm like, Darnold reminds me of these guys. One is Rich Gannon when he got to Oakland and just that kind of resurgence and playing in the West Coast system. The other one is Matt Hasselbeck, is another one he reminds me of. And then the one I think he's more of a better version of is Alex Smith. Because there were moments with Alex Smith where you'd watch him and you go like, Alex, why did you hyper lock on this guy? But then there was moments where it was like, man, Alex Smith is playing like he had that one game. We only had 1 incompletion, and he was a great guy for Mahomes to learn from. So those are kind of the 3 guys. When I look at Sam Darnold, I go, he's got a little bit of each of them.
Yeah, I like that. I like that comparison quite a bit.
All right, what else do we got in here? We got one. Okay, it's directly for you, Garrett. Do you think the Seahawks will finally sign Shaheed long term? And do you have any idea why that hasn't happened already?
Well, is it send or it says send? I was thinking like deep ball.
Oh, maybe it is. Maybe it's send it. Maybe yeah.
No, I have no idea why. There's times where teams and coaches do things I have no idea why. This is one of them. This is like a play where I would love to be able to have Sam under center. I would love to be able to have Rashid on one side, JSN on the other, have JSN run a deep cross or have Rashid run that deep post and basically say, Sam, play action, baby, first play of the game, one-on-one. If that safety does not go with Shaheed and you have one-on-one, let it fly, let him run underneath it. And if we have that touchdown on the first play of the divisional round, go for it. I would love for that to happen. I don't know, because Shaheed he's a player that I feel like is underappreciated. I feel like people like say Rashid Shaheed and they just like, oh, cool. He has a cool name, kind of like Antoine Randall back in the day. Like he's a cool name guy, but he's an underappreciated player because of what his skill set is and what he actually contributes. I mean, Rashid Shaheed had two of the most timely touchdowns this year with the Falcons kickoff return, and then of course the big one against the Rams. Get him the ball more. I don't have an answer for that. I would like for them to.
It's one of those weird things, and when I look at what Shaheed does so well, and I think back to like other NFL offenses over the years, the other thing he reminds me a bit of is when Emmanuel Sanders went to the 49ers there, like that, again, that addition of a player that gives you something that you don't have. But the thing that's bothering me, to your point, is they're not really using him for it. Like the game against the Niners, he had one catch for 2 yards on a quick out to start the game. Why is that the only time he's getting targeted in a game? So do you think we'll sign him long-term though, Garrett?
Honestly, there's a part of me where it's like, I mean, if they win the Super Bowl, I would say probably not, because I would like to think that Rashid would have a big impact on them. You know, I feel like there would be some big timely play somewhere. And then you also have the fact that, you know, you have Torrey Horton, and I don't know. I would be surprised, just because I think that it would be kind of like the Reek Woolen where we discussed, where somebody's going to pay quite a bit of money. And you also have you mentioned the Witherspoon extension, but you're definitely, JSN is going to outrank, you know, obviously Shaheed. So I would say probably not.
Okay. Misfit comes in with Kafka for an OC potential candidate. Seattle sniffed around him a few times now. Do you think he's a guy that they'd potentially look at bringing in, or what's your thoughts on Mike Kafka as a play caller and OC?
I mean, he's going to have more to work with than what he had in New York. I think he would be serviceable, give him some time to learn. I think that I would prefer McCown over Kafka. Maybe I'm way off on that one. I just think that I would prefer a guy that's already worked with Sam, that already knows Sam's intellect, you know, what his mental makeup is. I would prefer McCown to Kafka. Kafka's probably going to have more, I would say, pull in terms of future OCs, just because of the interim head coach, and then the fact that he called plays and all of that. So I would personally lean McCown specifically for Seattle.
So I agree with you on this one. What about Kafka and McCarthy? Who would you lean to? Would you lean more to Kafka in that situation?
I'd still lean McCarthy, because there's probably a part of Kafka where he's young enough where it's like, hey, like if I ball out, guess I'm gone. Like, see you, buddy. I got hosed because I had to take over for Brian Dable, and that wasn't my team. That wasn't the team that I wanted to build, and I wasn't, you know, in lock with the GM. So I would still lean McCarthy.
Okay. Brian comes in here and goes, if I were JS and Mike McDonald, I wouldn't have hired Kubiak if there was any chance he'd pull chalks after one season. If he does, then he's not true to his word. I don't know if there's anything ever put in there about him having to be here for a certain time. And you listen to Mike talk about it. Part of what he wants to do is develop coaches and give them these opportunities. If you get known as an organization where you won't give guys opportunities to go when they have an opportunity, your window of getting guys in will be smaller and smaller. Am I off on that at all, Garrett? Do you think?
No, I don't disagree with that. And it's also like, I mean, you can be a man of your word. I could say, hey, like, look, I'll go call plays. But I mean, if I'm getting paid hypothetically, and I don't know what the exact is, but if it's $3 million a year, and then a team says, hey, we're going to pay you $14 million a year to be the head coach, thanks, goodbye. I mean, 14, like double. I mean, you go to 8 figures a year. Yeah, I mean, that's you can't say to somebody that you need to do this. You know what I mean?
Agreed. We got Rainey in here going, the team is in a Super Bowl window. You obviously hire the best guy, period. It's not the time to worry about a lesser candidate sticking around. How do you view Seattle's Super Bowl window? Because I don't know if they're like in it yet. Like, I think they're like, to our point we talked about earlier, I think they're a year ahead. Like, they're just kind of opening their window. They're not really even in it yet.
I would say they're definitely in it. I mean, I would agree with you that they overachieved this year, but with the strides that everybody took, I would say, from now till the next, I would say, through to the 27th season, you would like to think. I would say the next 2 or 3 years, and you really can't project and say, well, in 2028, you can't. But I would say like the next, 2 years after this one, I would say you have at least a solid 3-year run.
Agreed. All right. WD Ford in here with a $5 donation. Appreciate it. Goes, Garrett, love the draft content. Give me one name at boundary corner for the Seahawks at number 32.
32. Appreciate it. Good way to give the $5 dono as well. Appreciate that. Appreciate that for my guy Bryce. I would say Brandon Cisse is a good call out. I do like Keith Abney from Arizona State. Those are players towards the end of the first round that I really like for Seattle. And I did a mock draft today. Recommend going to check it out. But no, I mean, you can never have enough corner depth, and I do think that Reek Woolen will probably be gone. So if you can get Cisse, you can get Abney, I would be fine with either of those players.
And WD Ford, I will be down at Senior Bowl, so I will make sure to keep an eye out for you down there. I'll be down there with Dan Viens and Brandon Kane for the week, so we'll be hanging out down there, and I'll be scouting out prospects and stuff and giving daily live draft coverage from down there. But Garrett, I just want to say, man, I really appreciate you coming on, doing this live show. This was definitely a different thing than what we've done in the past, but I know my viewers really appreciate it. Right now it's the final whistle, man. So you push all your stuff because it's great content, and let my viewers know where they can find it.
No, I appreciate it. Football Analysis, YouTube, of course, Apple, Spotify if you listen to podcasts, and then Twitter, Instagram. I've been dabbling in TikTok, but mainly YouTube, and then either Apple or Spotify. And Bryce, I mean, you're going to be down in Mobile. We better run into each other, meet up somehow. I'm going to be down there too. I can't wait.
Awesome. Yeah, no, for sure, man. Garrett, when I'm down there, I will definitely, we'll definitely link up at some point. I know Dan will probably want to as well. So it'll be a lot of fun. But again, everyone, the description and the link for Garrett's channel will be down below. So make sure you guys head over there, check that out. And again, I'll put this up on the screen for everybody in the top left corner there. That's my link tree. So you want to find where the show is on Spotify or any of the audio platforms, it'll be there as well as my GoFundMe for the trip down to Senior Bowl for the week. So if you want to, share that or contribute to it in any way, it's always greatly appreciated. But that's going to put a wrap on tonight's show, everybody. So again, appreciate everybody coming and being a part of tonight's show. I'll be on with Jason Aponte on Thursday at 4:30 p.m. And we're going to do again, crossover Seahawks 49ers. So get interesting and spicy with Jason as always. And then we got Seahawks Syndicate with myself, Mookie Alexander, Dan Viens, and Brandon Kane at 6 o'clock on Thursday night. So back-to-back again. So as we always say here, stay loud, be proud, and go Hawks. Have a good night, everybody.